On April 9th, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of the Russian Wagner mercenary group, declared that his troops were in legal control of Bakhmut, a city in eastern Ukraine, after raising a flag atop the ruins of the local administration's building. Despite Prigozhin's boasting, Hanna Maliar, the deputy minister of defense for Ukraine, said Bakhmut was still in Kiev's control and that the situation there was very tense. The Donetsk region's largest city, which has been entirely whipped out and is known to Ukrainian forces as Fortress Bakhmut, has been a problem for Russia to take over for months. The world awoke on February 24th of last year to the news that Russian tanks had entered Ukraine from the east and the north. For months, troops had been amassing on Ukraine's borders, and Russian President Vladimir Putin had delivered a number of heated speeches over the ongoing armed conflict in the Donbas. There were predictions that the conflict may end quickly, with Ukrainian forces perhaps being encircled in a matter of days. Yet this hasn't turned out to be the case. On November 11th, after Russia said that its troops had finished evacuating the southern city of Kherson, Ukrainian soldiers moved into former Russian positions, putting a close to one of Putin's invasion's major losses. The advance of Kiev and Moscow's disorganized retreat over the Dnipro River, which was carried out under artillery fire from Ukraine, meant that Russia had lost the only provincial capital it had managed to seize throughout the war, as well as key strategic locations. The first significant Ukrainian counterattack since Russia's all-out invasion of the country began in February was undertaken at the end of August, despite Kiev's complaints that its soldiers lacked the heavy Western weapons to execute a meaningful counteroffensive. In just 6 days, the Ukrainian offensive cleared 3,000 square kilometers of land, giving Ukraine its biggest win since driving Russian troops from the capital in March. A number of various factors, including geography, the Russians' mistakes, modern weapons, and Ukraine's inventiveness with smartphones and bits of foam mat, combined to deter the Russians in Kiev. The village of Moshchun, which was the scene of a significant engagement, is visible from a distance of 3 kilometers, and the woods nearby are where Oleksandr Konoko, a Ukrainian battalion commander, told how small groups of his soldiers approached to encircle the Russians while carrying anti-tank weaponry. The Russians' wish to take over the Ukrainian capital finally gave up after a month at Moshchun and in the other suburban towns and villages to the northwest of Kyiv. The Ukrainians call them karamats, and they can be bought for as cheap as $2. These foam mat pieces also prevented Moscow's forces from advancing. The mats stop Russian drones with thermal imaging equipment from detecting body heat. Konoko noted, "We held the karamats over our heads. At night, we moved stealthily in little groups. In this manner, soldiers carrying anti-tank weaponry provided by the US, Britain, and other nations could approach the Russians quietly, launch their lethal missiles, and then quickly evade the enemy." This is put into perspective by the account of Konoko. He explained that he had suffered multiple wounds while fighting in the east after the conflict in Donbas, where pro-Russian militants and Russian forces created 2 separate states in 2014. He was sitting on his karamat in his headquarters in Kiev, with his pistol on the coffee table and his AK-47 propped up by the sofa while talking about the war operations in which he participated. However, some factors outside of Ukraine do not share this optimistic view of the current situation on the Ukrainian battlefield. According to Bloomberg, some EU countries that have been supporting Kiev have begun to question if Kiev will be able to retake sizable portions of the country this year. According to the publication, citing unnamed EU officials, even a slight advance would probably result in significant casualties among Ukrainian forces and require large quantities of ammunition and equipment. As noted by the newspaper, Ukraine's Western partners would need to increase their military production capability to support such a campaign. However, the source warns that additional massive deliveries would face political resistance in other countries. The report also included a warning from an anonymous European official that any such effort would be expensive in terms of both people and munitions, because Russian forces have had time to dig in and have minefields, trenches, and concrete anti-tank structures in position. While the Ukrainian government has been ramping up the counteroffensive for several months, senior European defense officials have warned the media that it will most likely start by mid-May. The sources claim that strikes might come from many different types of directions. On April 11th, Denis Shmyhal, the Prime Minister of Ukraine, said that the counteroffensive might potentially start in the summer. He pointed out that Kiev was not under any pressure from its Western sponsors to take action without proper planning. The Ukrainian government also requested that the West send more artillery, ammunition, intermediate and long-range missiles, tanks, and fighter jets to Ukraine.